Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Gurnam Singh, and I'd like to welcome you to another Sikh Think Tank special show. Special that this is the second in a series that we have been focusing on global challenges from the Sikh perspective. And in today's episode, we will be looking at the issue of diversity. And we're honored to be joined once again by Dr. Jasdev Singh Rai, who, as people will know, is the director of the Sikh Human Rights Group, which is a very respected voice at the United Nations, focusing on human rights, ethics, and intercultural dialogue. Now, Dr. Rai and his team have been leading an important initiative at the UN. In fact, they've been working on this since 2001, when there was a big UN conference on racism in Durban, South Africa. And that is the question of diversity. And in fact, in the recent past, they made a proposal to the United Nations on a declaration on diversity and had some debates as well. And this represents a global call to move beyond merely tolerating differences towards embracing them and celebrating them with a pluralistic vision of diversity. And in today's show, we will be exploring what this vision means for our world, how it could transform global policy, reshape how nations view diversity, and also build truly inclusive societies. And of course, all of this is done inspired by the Sikh perspective. So, Dr. Jasdev Singh Ji, welcome to the Think Tank again. It's a pleasure to have you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Okay, so we're going to start right at the beginning. The vision behind the declaration. As I said, I think you've been working on this for at least 2 decades. So, could you start by sharing what inspired this initiative and what gaps you perceived in the framework that it seeks to fill in terms of human rights framework?
Okay, so from in our gurdwaras, the langar is available to anybody and everybody, and nobody asks a non-Sikh, why have you come here? And we don't push a book on them. We don't tolerate them, just ask them to cover their head, take their shoes off, and go and eat whatever you want, and we can talk to them. And in many gurdwaras, particularly Harmandir Sahib, people from many faiths and non-faiths come, they do matha tek, okay? And Ranjit Singh's Raj was famous for its pluralism rather than tolerance. He didn't say we must, he didn't try to put figures in that we must have 20% of this, 50% of that. He just saw who was best, and on basis of merit, that he promoted the person. Now, there's something intrinsic within Gursikhi that we don't judge people from our own perspective and say, look, he's not a good Sikh, therefore we are not going to talk to him, or we are not going to accept him. Okay? We accept them on their terms as long as there are some values there. And we don't try to convert. And that is a true, in my opinion, basis of diversity and coexistence, where you can live with other people without trying to force them to be like yourselves. Now, that is not the history of the Western world or even Abrahamic worlds, where you're judged from a certain particular position, and then you are either tolerated. The word tolerance is a political word. It means that I may not like you, I may not like what you do, but we have to live in this room or in this house or in this land, and we'll tolerate you. Okay? That's not the same as saying, okay, I understand you have a different perspective and I have a different perspective. I have my perspective, but let's coexist. There is no, I don't want to judge you. I don't want to just tolerate you. I accept you for what you are. And the thing that struck us at the World Conference Against Racism, in fact, it was obvious to us within our many forays on human rights in Geneva and UN, that the entire perspective of racism and the rights not to be discriminated on the basis of race is very much rooted in colonialism. Okay, racism became quite an institutional thing during colonialism because Europeans went around the world to justify their rule. They promoted themselves as God's chosen or above everybody else, more intelligent. Everybody else had a different color because they're inferior mentally and everything. And they then ruled over countries. If you see, one of the reasons why the British Empire only lasted 200 years, whereas the Roman Empire lasted 1400 years, was the British never integrated with the Indians. They never integrated with the local people. They were always a class above, like the Brahmins in the past. So when independence came to many countries, and when people came to this country, they felt that racism. Okay? And what they were asking the white man was, you have to accept us. You have to accept us, and we have rights as well, not to be treated as inferior beings. And the problem with a rights-based approach to diversity is that, in a way, there's a hidden or an intrinsic, or you can say subliminal statement in there that I am begging somebody to treat me as a person. Now, why should I be begging somebody? Okay, and this struck us in the run-up to the World Conference Against Racism, and we first introduced the idea of cultural diversity, and saying racial diversity is meaningless without cultural diversity. The reason behind that was the message from the West generally and the UN, which was basically controlled by the West, was your color is okay now, but your culture is not okay, right? So they pushed secularism, they pushed all sorts of things such as this is how things are done here, this is how you have to behave yourself. Your culture, your value systems are just a religion, and they're just a faith. Okay? And said, well, look,
let me pick
if
that
you
one. Just if you let me just pick that one up, because you've said a lot there, and I want to unpack some of this stuff if you don't mind.
yeah
On in your document, in fact we've got it on the screen at the back, the brief declaration on diversity report. I'm going to just quote from there, and I just want you to. You say that that the UN as it's configured, treaties, regulations, and agreements centered on protecting human rights are based on the false assumption that there is one universal set of collective values. And so this type of so-called universalism is the idea that one size fits all, or that one universal ideology of ethics can justify and permeate all international agreements and can therefore be directly applicable to all civilizations and cultures. So you're clearly, making an argument for cultural relativism. So this kind of plurality of ethics, if you like. I mean, that's going to create chaos, isn't it, if we have a plurality of ethics?
Well, no, I think it's not the word relativism is not probably appropriate here. Okay, pluralism is slightly different than
against universalism. You seem to be against
I'm
so-called.
I am against it. Yeah, I am against.
Based on universal values. The Charter is based on universal values.
Well, yes, we have a position against universal value. Let me try and explain very simply. Okay, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for instance, is based on the individual rights concept of the European civilization. Okay, everybody has a right to this, everybody has a right to this, everybody has a right to this, etc., etc. Fine. Now, if you look into history of, let us say, the Sikhs or Indians, generally before colonialism and even during colonialism, before they became independent and adopted everything that the West had, if you look at the Dharma Shastras, if you look at the concepts within the Guru Granth Sahib, it's not about rights, is it? It's about responsibilities and duties. You as a presenter here, have a responsibility to treat me with respect. Okay? Maybe in the end result is the same. Okay? But I am not giving you the power to treat me badly or not to treat me badly. I'm not going to beg you when I'm saying treat me with with propriety. Okay? Rights is asking that. Rights is asking I am in India. I'm a Sikh. I'm asking the white man to treat me. And this is the statement we made at the plenary at the World Conference Against Racism in 2001. I said, look, I'm a Sikh. I wear a turban. Okay? If I was that obsessed with asking the white man to treat me equally, I would have taken my turban off. And it is a fact. A lot of people, when they came from India here, they took their turbans off. Not because they had suddenly thought this was a useless item. They were facing a superior and more powerful culture and they wanted to integrate in it. Okay? And most of us, people like you and I later on, I didn't, I had taken my turban off for other reasons, but I started wearing it again in 1986. We didn't care whether the white man had to treat us on our terms. Okay? We're not going to ask him to treat us equally or not equally. So rights is asking somebody to treat you. And that is what the Universal Declaration is also based on, a thinking, on a framework, on a, you can say, epistemology, on a construction that somebody has the right to treat you or mistreat you. And we're saying, no, nobody has the right to treat you or mistreat you. Everybody has to be respected. And therefore, what about things like responsibilities? And, another example, in most in Sikh families or Indian families, in fact, non-Western families, a boy at the age of 16, 17 can't just turn to his parents and say, my individual right, I'm going away. So thank you very much for raising me. You look after yourself and I'll really look after myself. You try that and you'll find a whole army of your relatives and even the community will descend on you and say, hello, Gurnam Singh, you can't do that. Let's assume you were at 16 now and you're thinking like a Western person. And they will say, Gurnam Singh, you can't do that. There's things like responsibilities. Your parents have brought you up. You're responsible now. Okay? They were responsible for you. You have responsibility for them. And you have duties. You can't walk out like this. Yeah? That thing, that is not included in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights because no other civilization or culture mattered as far as the West is concerned. That is why I think some values, we don't kill. But why don't we kill? Why does the state kill then? Why does if we don't kill, if we're not allowed to take anything's life, why does the state have capital punishment? Yeah? It can't only be responsibility.
All right. I think you've made a good point there. And I think, there are kind of fine philosophical arguments to be made here. But so you're basically arguing that we need to go beyond the rights-based approach. And, you've described the present system as being piecemeal and adversarial, where individuals must fight for recognition. So how would your declaration change that? And what does a positive, maybe a proactive approach to diversity look like, this pluralistic approach? How is that going to be different? How is that going to improve things?
Okay. Let me just digress a little bit about what happened in 2001. It was very interesting. When we brought the whole idea of culture diversity, countries like Pakistan, India took it up because they suddenly realized that this is a thing. As an NGO, you can't really take ownership. And they took ownership and it went out of our hand, although it became a major thing. It's about 40% the declaration on declaration and plan of action of the Durban Declaration, etc. Okay, we held a conference here in London, and the Commission for Racial Equality. That was it was before the whole equalities and human rights thing became. They were quite impressed. They said they never heard anything like this before. Okay, this is a new approach that without culture diversity, without accepting me on my terms, and not asking me to change to be like a European, that racial diversity is meaningless. Okay. Now, when we went there and we proposed this idea, this is the other angle of this. What we proposed was the whole declaration, declaration on anti-racism and freedom from discrimination is based and embedded in colonialism. And we said it's 60 years after colonialism. Why are we asking the European to treat us equally? Okay? Isn't it time that everybody just moved on from there instead of being locked in a battle which is now finished? Okay? Countries have become independent. So let's move on. And we proposed that. We proposed that to many countries, and many countries liked it, many NGOs liked it. And when we proposed to the Europeans, this is the very interesting bit. They were not willing to sign up to that. They signed up to the culture diversity because countries ganged up on the idea of moving beyond freedom from racial discrimination to something that is a positive one in accepting diversity. They were not interested at all. Now, I realized what was going on here. If Gurnam Singh, if I have the power, okay, to treat you with respect or not to treat you with respect, let's say if I'm an employer, okay, if I had the power, why would I give it up? You see, there's a subtle sort of a subliminal power there that somebody has got the power to treat you equally or not to treat you equally, and they don't want to give that power away. So they want everybody to be begging them, yeah, treat us equally, treat us equally. They like it. They like the whole, they put a lot of money into this. People going around, banding around and saying, treat us equally. There should be no racism, right? I said, look, finish racism. Let's move on beyond that. The only country who signed up to it, you'll be surprised, and it's not a country known for anti-racism, was Russia. Russia introduced the clause in the education thing, okay? And we then proposed it, and we once we got our consultative status 2015, we proposed it. Now, this is the difference. We know our own history in this country. The right to wear turban, we had to campaign, okay? It was not accepted. It was not accepted in the buses and many places, so we had to campaign, okay? And we went to court, and in the court, there was a judgment, okay? Now, that creates tension. It creates tension, it creates politics, because there are many people, many white at that time, who didn't like the idea of Sikhs being given the right to wear turban, because why should they be different? They've come to our country, they should be like us. Why don't they wear hats like every other bus driver does? Okay, but the court finally decided. Now, you see, that's an adversarial system. You're fighting, always fighting. Now, we were strong. We were a united community, despite people saying we are divided. We are quite united in many of our struggles. We were quite united. But if you're a weak community, if you're only a few, how are you going to get that right? The court may not. The court sometimes may say, "Fine, there's a small community. It's not really going to do much." Courts of judges are not always very objective, and they may not give you that right. And we're saying,
okay. The big question is, it's good in theory, and how we would get this implemented. Now, the declaration you propose isn't legally binding, but relies on a kind of voluntary commitment. How can we ensure that such commitments then will translate into policy and measurable progress rather than just being aspirational? Isn't that going to be the problem? And certainly countries like France and maybe other countries with very kind of powerful secular traditions are hardly going to be shifting that their whole basis is secular. So they're not going to be moving. I mean, we found that with the Sikh turban case in France, for example. They're not going to bend on that. And in places like in Holland now, another place, they're banning even the hijab. So really, how are you going to implement this?
Okay, so what we're saying is, I'll come to the France turban thing. The France wasn't banning it for Sikhs anyway. The Sikhs got it banned themselves. Okay, so let's not. The Sikhs are very clever in getting their own goals. One is a process of rights, which you have to go through courts. Okay, and the judge and everybody decides. Now, the other is changing culture. Now, this is incredible. What happened was, we were trying to encourage in Britain in 2001, why don't you take this up, because you are quite big in diversity. They weren't interested. And 2002 or 3, when they made the bid for the Olympics, they put diversity as a central thing in their application. I was quite annoyed, actually. Not annoyed, I was good, flattered that our idea had been taken by them, but they didn't acknowledge it at all, that where they got it from. Now in Britain, you see, Britain is a great example where the Declaration of Diversity works without it having been said in that many words. So employers were asked to take certain percentage of ethnic communities and others, okay, and even institutions like BBC have had to take people with hijab and things like that. So it creates an impression of diversity, okay, and in schools, the education system, teaching children, etc., a lot from diversity. In some countries that doesn't exist, and what we're suggesting
Britain is a bit
is
of an outlier, isn't it? Britain is a bit of an outlier. If you look at what's happening across Europe, even in North America, there's a real kind of push against. In fact, in the States, if you will know that the diversity, equality, and include DEA policies have been scrapped by Trump, and we're getting similar noises in this country. So, really, if anything, we're moving away from your ideal.
You're true. You're right, and I think the ideal is not very different than other countries. I mean, in India, despite all the thing on caste, etc., the average Indian is still very casteist. Okay, so it's they have different concepts of racial discrimination. Here they are, and it's all white supremacy, trying to get we own this, we are losing power, etc. That's fine, but if you change people's, you see, what is that based on? It's based on a concept of superiority. If you remove the concept of superiority, then you move towards diversity. And that's the beauty of Gursikhi. Okay? And in Gursikhi, we don't go around telling people, our religion is the best, yours is a false religion, maybe you should convert. So the roots of racism in Europe, or whether you go to Saudi or go to Middle East, they are quite racist as well. Okay, the roots of that is based in the Abrahamic religions, where one is superior than others, either by choice, people, or by choice of a certain ideology. Okay, so anybody who is not a Christian is inferior. Anybody Muslim is inferior. And now it's come to anybody who doesn't accept European values is inferior. Okay? So it's that intolerance is inherent, and therefore you tolerate because you're living in the same space. We're saying trying to change the culture. You can't change culture by law. You can't force people to change. So we're saying by example, look at countries which have done well.
Well, I was going to bring you there, just Dave. I'm going to bring you there because I mean, we talked about the UK is maybe an outlier in terms of the bigger nations, but at your UN event, you do mention Bolivia's purely national model, or even South Africa's indigenous knowledge framework, and Switzerland's linguistic diversity. So, what do these examples teach us about societies that truly embrace diversity? What is it in those that gives us some kind of forward kind of vision as to how we might move into a different way of doing things?
Right. Bolivia is an extraordinary country. I mean, now they've got a bit of a right-wing government. We don't know whether it will survive in the form it was. They've got a plurinational constitution. What they did was they sat with the indigenous Bolivians who'd been there for thousands of years, and the new settlers. They said, look, these are our values. You tell us your values, and we will make a constitution which we will abide by the constitution prerogatives that we introduce, and you introduce your prerogatives, okay? And we will not force our prerogatives on you, and you don't need to force yours on us. And it's a plurinational constitution which works best. And that used to be, believe it or not, what happened during colonialism, where they used to say, okay, customary law, okay, your local law, that's fine. You accept that, and there is a national law. I mean, things like you can't go and kill people. So you can, even if your religion may have some funny, like sati and things like that. There's some values which are made national, but other than the Sikhs had their own value system, the Marathis had their own value system and their own laws and their customary laws, etc. But now India has become very Europeanized and become like a European country, one law, one country. And that.
But I sense a contradiction. I sense a contradiction in your argument. I just want to push you on this one, yeah. So there has to be some checks and balances, because anybody could. I mean, let's take some. I don't know. Say Islamists could claim that we believe in many wives or marriages. I mean that they do that, or something like Sharia law might be one. So your model would then say they should be allowed to practice Sharia law in this country. Wouldn't that?
Well, they already are.
So you have
They
to
already
apply some
are.
checks and balances. Well, but you have
Yeah,
to.
they already.
You yourself said you have to apply some checks and balances. You mentioned sati. So in sense, you're still saying we need a universal principles, even if it's a broader kind of. There's more leeway. You can't get rid of
Yeah.
universal principles, can you?
Yeah. No, there are certain universal values or systems, okay, such as we all need to eat. Okay, we can't sort of say you don't need to eat, I don't need to eat, and we all need to have a balanced diet. Okay, you can't say that Gurnam Singh here can survive without proteins and Jasdev Singh here can survive without vitamins. There is no such thing. There are certain things which
But I
are
can survive
universal.
without halal meat. But what about surviving without halal food? You're ritually
Yeah, hold
slaughtered
on.
food.
Yeah, they're fair enough. Now, if the Muslims want halal meat, fair enough. That is what their belief is, okay, which is allowed in this country. But those who don't want halal meat, which, for instance, we in the Sikhs, I mean, I don't eat meat, but people who eat meat, we are told that God does not want anybody's life. Okay, so do not pretend, because that's sacrificial meat. Halal meat is sacrificial meat. You're sacrificing it. You're saying a prayer and then eating it. Yeah? And our thinking is that God is not interested in any sacrificial things. Yeah? You want to eat it with your own conscience. You kill the animal yourself and eat it, or have some system like that. So again, I don't have an issue with people eating halal meat if that's what their belief is. Okay.
But should the state be responsible for providing that? I mean, anybody can have their liberty but should this state be providing these things? I mean, I suppose I'm going back to the kind of French model where they're very clear. The state will not I mean, where do you draw the line?
Yeah,
I mean, in the Indian Constitution, for example, is Muslim law. The Indian Constitution does recognize Sikhs, although under the kind of broader Hindu umbrella. So is that the kind of constitution we want? We want separate personal law for different religious communities.
Well, it not necessarily. Yeah, well, I mean, there's no danger in that. But then I suspect a lot of countries will not. I mean, one of the reasons for universalizing a system within even a state is that the babus or the civil servants are very lazy. Okay, they don't want to start thinking in parallel terms. Oh, this one's law is that, this one's law is that. Okay, they want to universalize everything so that it is easy for them and the state doesn't have to spend too much money. Okay, but the whole world survived like that for a long time. If you look at Indian civilization, it survived like that for a long time. Yeah? In Ranjit Singh's time, it survived like that. We didn't ask Muslims not to eat halal meat, did we, in Ranjit Singh's time? They were allowed to do whatever they want according to their religion. There are some values, of course, you don't go around murdering people. Yeah? You can't get away with that. And,
so we do need some universal. We do need some universal standards.
There's some universal values. I'm not sure whether principles or values, but the way you agree with that and the way you reach that can be different. Okay, and we use that in the climate change thing. In 2008, we were invited to Bangkok to give a Sikh perspective on a universal ethics of environment. And I said, look, as an Indian and particularly as a Sikh, I have a problem with the word universal. Okay? And this is and I thought, I said, what may be universal to you may not be universal to me. I thought they were not going to invite me again. They probably think that this man is a troublemaker, as Sikhs normally are. But but they kept on calling me again and again. Okay, and I gave my reason. I said, listen, this is a very simple difference. Abrahamic religions are based on the idea of fear of God. Okay, if you don't fear God, if you don't do what God has told you, then you go to hell. But in Indian civilization, in Indian belief systems, whether it's us, Sikhs, Hindus, Jains, Buddhists, we don't have the concept of fear of God. We don't have the concept of heaven and hell. Some have the concept of reincarnation. So it's like going into a class, you fail, you go back, you fail, you go back, you fail, you go back, and if you fail, keep on failing, you don't pass your secondary school or you don't go to university. Okay? You keep on being recycled. So we grow to love God. We love to grow, love everything that exists. Now, if you tell the average European the world is going to end in 30 years, they can connect because fear is the basis of their civilization. They fear the state. They fear this is why after 9/11, the state security system was everybody loved it actually. Well, they might complain, they loved it because that is part of their civilization. A lot of us didn't like it. Yeah. Now, I said the average European connects with the idea of the world is going to end in 30 years. But if you go to the average Indian on the street who's not been to university, yeah, and you tell him the world is going to end in 30 years, and he will say, well, what does it matter? Because my soul will be reincarnated, and we've always believed there are many universes. Yeah? I mean, it says in the Guru Granth Sahib, it is also in some of the Hindu thinking, in the Vedanta thinking, there are many universes. So your soul is going to go somewhere else. And if it's the karma of the world to finish in 30 years, what is it I can do? There's nothing I can do. Okay? And this is extraordinary, where Baba Seva Singh's successful project doesn't appeal the idea of the end of the world. Okay, it doesn't appeal that your children will have nowhere to survive. He says, Guru Granth Sahib says, Sabha Diyan ka ik data. So why have you stolen the homes of the birds and the bees, etc.? Where is their homes? Okay, and they then start planting trees.
Let me come to that point just there because we're connecting now diversity and nature. I know that the proposal links human diversity with biodiversity, seeing both as features of nature. Can you explain this connection and how environmental and cultural inclusion go hand in hand? What is that connection?
Well, if we accept diversity, which is, I think, very much intrinsic to our value system, our Guru Granth Sahib's teachings, that we accept diversity, we accept the same Atma in everything. Every being, kat ke andar peer pachanat. ठीक है ना? Accept, recognize that's the same thing in every animal, every species, everything, every plant, every living and non-living thing. Okay? Once we start to accept that, then we begin to respect them as well. Okay? Then we do not take away the diversity that nature has given us. And we value, this is the reason why we keep our beards and we don't cut our hair. It's not because we wanted to be different or we wanted we wanted to sort of show that we have an army of bearded people. Yeah? It's because we accept nature for what it is. This is what has been given to us. We accept it. Yeah? And we accept it not because we blindly accept things, but we think that what Paramatma has created in the end has value to us. Yeah? Keeping the hair may have value. We probably scientists have not come up with the answer yet. There's a lot of Sikhs who make up these things about what science says about beard, but we have not seen any evidence yet. But there must be a value. And one of the things, if we're keeping our hair, we're not cutting our hair, our beards, nature as well. Every plant has a value. Every diversity has a value. Okay, and we know now biodiversity has a lot of value. Similarly, having different ideas in human society, after all, religions, ideologies are fictions in a way we create. Okay? And they may have a value. They may have a value in the end. And there's genetic diversity has a value because some people can survive in certain climates and things like that, circumstances others cannot. And
let me come at a different angle on this one because you're absolutely right. And I've done some work on biodiversity, and the planet. Nothing can survive without biodiversity. We know that, and we are destroying a lot of diversity. But it seems to me that you're kind of quite romantic in the way in which you think about diversity. It's almost as if you're saying everybody should be able to express their own cultural kind of lifestyles. And maybe there was a time in human history where people were, populations were relatively stable. People were able to just be themselves. But we live in a very kind of complex world now, where lots of intermixing. Lots of as it were, people mixing, cultures mixing, and so you can't have a free for all there, can you? You have to have some kind of norms of behavior, norms of just like dress, for example. You could argue that if you say, from the parts of Africa that you wouldn't dress. You would maybe walk around in very or maybe even some of these Nanga sadhus in India. What if they come to this country and say, we want to exercise our right to our own diversity? We want to walk about in the nude. I know it might be a bit cold, but how would you? I mean, it just seems like a crazy idea.
I think we shouldn't argue things in binaries or extremes of binaries, universalism or complete anti-universalism.
No, I think
There's
we
a
accept
happy
that,
sort
but
of yeah.
but
So
but you
yeah,
seem to be talking about a world that doesn't exist. That world is gone. We live in this
no.
metropolitan,
It
cosmopolitan
hasn't
world.
gone. No, it hasn't gone. There are countries who are quite successful, like Bolivia has, New Zealand has to some extent. Okay, Switzerland has 4 national languages. Okay, and that's been there like that for hundreds of years. All right, they have
Yeah, it hasn't got
accepted their
much of a
4
choice.
languages.
It doesn't have much
Sorry,
of a choice. It lives on the boundaries of so many other countries. It's only a small country.
it's not a matter
So,
where it doesn't got a choice. You know what happened in France? All the regional languages are forced out. Okay, all the regional cultures were forced out. Not forced out. They were not forced out as people. They were forced out. They were told not to do that, and that is what is happening in India now. Okay? That the attempt by the BJP is to universalize India into one sort of thinking, one God, one Ram. And Banerjee, Mamata Banerjee, I think from Bengal said, no, you have your Ram, we have our Kali Mata. Okay, so we don't believe in the same gods.
let me take you on that point then. Let me take you on that one. I mean, you could argue that the Sikhs are busy doing the same thing. This is one Maryada. If you fit this Maryada, you're a Sikh. If you don't, you're not a Sikh. So you have all these traditions amongst Sikhs, Nanak Panthis, the Bhagat tradition, whole lot of other who are now, they're erased from the Sikh identity because they don't follow this one cultural kind of behavior. So where does it end?
Right. That's because the Sikhs have become modernized. They've gone to universities like you, Gurnam Singh. They've been taught by people like you. Not by you. I mean, I'm not taking it from you. But they've been, you see, if you look at the Sikhs now, and you look at the Puratan Sikhs, there's a huge difference. Okay? What the Sikhs in the West have done, this is a very interesting conversation I had with the Home Office, when the whole interfaith marriages sort of thing came, okay? And he said, why are you Sikhs becoming extremist? I said, well, no, look, hold on. None of the Sikhs students who come from India do this. The Sikhs who come from India haven't done this. Sikhs who come from East Africa haven't done this. The Sikhs in many other countries don't do this. The only Sikhs who are obsessed with this are the ones who've gone through your schooling system. Yeah? So if the young Sikhs have gone through your schooling system and your universities, they are the one leading this. It's not an issue in India. It's not an issue anywhere. You tell me what have you put in their brains. Sikhs who were educated in the West have become very much like Protestants. They look things in binaries, in black and white. Okay, they do not look at the context of Gursikhi. Okay? And they are, if you have arguments with them, it's about baldi khal kaddi jani. That's what they do. Yeah? No, you have to get up at this time. Does it matter what time? Okay? Does it matter how this sort of thing in the end? I've had conversation with some of them. Nandalalji was an Amritdhari. Oh no, that's a fiction made by the Hindus. Okay, fiction made. So they've put themselves into some sort of a little.
No, that's a fair point. Okay, let just and then one of the proposals that you're making is this annual UN Diversity Day. What role would that play in inspiring nations and communities to maybe take ownership of some of these initiatives?
What we're saying is, for instance, in the Middle East, they will not accept the idea of gay rights. Okay. And in other countries, and in the Middle East or in some other countries, they will not accept the idea of religions being treated, or in this country, for instance, giving Sharia law more power than what it is. Sharia law is just considered as something in the personal life of couples or people, but the state law still takes precedence over that. Yeah? If parties do not agree, they can go to the court, and that court's ruling takes precedence over the Sharia decisions. Okay, it's the same with the Jewish; they have their own legal system, but the state legal system overrides everything, right? But in some countries, they have this parallel, you might say, parallel universes. Okay, so our idea is, look, let's not make it binding. Okay, if people, but let's at least move away from this extreme position of us superior and others inferior. Okay? Let's start accepting the diversity that nature has created or Paramatma has created, diversity of ideas, beliefs, and things like that. Okay. In the end, nobody knows whose belief system is the absolute right. We believe ours is right. They believe theirs is right. Okay. So once we begin to accept that, we don't know. We don't know whether atheists are right. We don't know such a thing as even objectivity in social sciences has got any meaningful, because the world is still very depressed, still fighting, still doing everything. It hasn't really produced the peace that we wanted. Yeah? So nobody is really produced. So let's accept the diversity of accept things, and accept is as much as you can. You don't need to accept everything on the first go. Okay, try and make people more comfortable with diversity. That's the big thing we are saying. Make people comfortable with diversity. If you have an annual day of diversity, different countries can showcase what steps they've taken to make their majority comfortable with diversity, or what steps they've taken to ensure their countries are accepting and people do not have to fight. Now, let us say, I think in this country at least, we don't know what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years when Mr. Farage sort of becomes
when Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister.
Yeah,
I think your
Prime Minister.
diversity there will be a bit of a pipe dream, I think, then.
Yeah, so here, I think, well, I don't know, because the majority of people in this country now, okay, the majority of white people, and therefore we are in a way, because they're their country, they are in the majority, they have now moved on from 1950s and 60s when they were scared or they were apprehensive about different cultures. In the United States, it started like that, and now they've gone back into this white supremacy nonsense. Okay, that's something that happens because the foundation of their culture does not accept diversity in the way we do. That was the success of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, not because of him, because Gursikhi does not permit you to discriminate. Okay, in those cultures, discrimination is inherent. How do you get rid of that discrimination?
Let me just bring this. I mean, the other point is, I think, again, you mentioned it in your documents, is this notion of emerging frontiers of diversity. We talk about neurodiversity. This is a new space. Linguistic diversity. And we know about gender, environmental. We could talk about sexual minorities, and the Sikhs are still struggling to even have a conversation about this. So how can this declaration remain dynamic in a world that maybe diversity doesn't have any boundaries? I mean, is it like an open book, or will you be saying these are the kind of diversities that we'll be focusing on?
No. We assume we are just making the proposal. It is a bit of in the UN. They're even more entrenched in the systems they believe in, because that's what diplomats are taught. They go to the same universities and then they start believing in those. Okay, that's where their careers depend on. So it takes, for instance, the Declaration on the Rights of Farmers took 20 years. Okay, so it takes a long time. Now, we came with this with three ideas, three missions really. Well, the first one was that the gurus gave a lot of new concepts to the world. Okay, they didn't just do canny, okay, just saying things. They did karni, and they did things as well. You see, they changed the environment around them. Okay, they didn't just change the Sikhs, but they changed the environment around them as well. Okay, now we Sikhs, for instance, since colonialism, we've been very insular. We live in a cocoon. We live in gurdwaras, and that's it. We don't think that we have anything to say to the world. There are huge issues in the world, and if you look at some of the thinkings and the teachings in the Guru Granth Sahib, the gurus, we can take some of them and tell the world, look, this may be one way of looking at things. This may be one solution. Okay, so that is one of our missions, was to bring the teachings of the gurus onto the international platform, and then the world community beginning to respect Sikhs, not just as people
Mm.
who have a certain religion and wear a turban and they keep their beards. Okay, they see Sikhs as people who have ideas,
But,
and the ideas are coming
but
from
if you
Guru.
take
So that's one thing.
let let's take the I mean, I think I accept that Guru Granth Sahib, the teaching of the Gurus, offers a beautiful kind of basis for applying those principles across the world. But we Sikhs are not very we don't really practice diversity. I mean, look at the gurdwaras; they are nearly all dominated, the committees, by men, often half educated, angry old men. Even our institutions, the Darbar Sahib doesn't allow women to perform kirtan. Many of the deras don't allow any kind of diversity. There's still discrimination based on caste. So we Sikhs can't really go and tell other people how to do diversity if we look at our own institutional failures.
Okay, I had a couple of MPs talking to me about that sort of thing, and my answer to that is that look at the period of the Sikhs before 1848, and look at the period and look at the Sikhs after 1848. Look at the issue of let me bring the issue of caste. There was no concept of caste. I mean, one of the big writers on caste from Delhi University, Sikhs have caste, and I asked him one simple question: tell me something. Were there people, now we label them low caste, okay? Were there people from that group who were generals in the army? He said yes. And I said, so what do you think happened? So this general, let's say, Amrit Singh, who comes from, let's say, the scheduled caste. So he comes from the Chamardi in the morning, and he says to the judge, now we have to fight. And then in the evening, the judge said to him, okay, we've come back now. You go back to Chamardi. We can't eat with you. Did this happen? He said, no. I said, so where is this caste thing coming from then? Okay, you are saying there was a lot of caste. Tell me, where is it coming from? Because you can't respect a general. You will not follow a general if you don't respect him. Okay? If you think that general is beneath you, you will never follow his advice. You will never follow his rulings. You will say, "Oh, chale, tu to nimi jaat da banda." hai." So there was no this discrimination. Similarly, with women, there were a lot of women who were very strong. We did not go engage in the politics of equality. 50% women, 50%. This is just the West washing its sins. For 2,000 years, they thought women had no brain, not capable of spiritual thing. Now they're washing that. They suddenly found that women have brains and they are capable of spirituality and they're capable of doing things. So they've gone into this overdrive onto the other side of the pendulum. Okay, what happened during British colonialism was 1881. The first census form was brought in. Majority of Indians, not just the Sikhs, did not know what their caste was. And the British from here, Europeans went there, hundreds of them, okay, hundreds of social scientists went there. They told people what their caste was. They told people, and they had this criteria. Somebody is dark is a low caste, somebody is a flat nose is a low caste, somebody who's got a small skull is a low caste. And they put people into this. And then they put people into caste based on their work category. And then in 1921, the head of the British census, or the Indian census said, we created this disease in these people and now we blame them for it. Yeah? He's on the record. It's on the
This is the argument that the RSS are often making, that there was no caste in India. That was the British that. I mean, that's the RSS argument,
okay.
isn't it?
No, it's not that argument, because it's an argument, and it's been proven now by many scholars now, including that Judith Bailey from Oxford, and then there is it Cambridge, and then that other chap from in the USA, Berkeley. Okay, I think he's now the vice chancellor there or something. The people who have come up with a lot of statistical evidence that there wasn't. Now, what the British did was they introduced the law that only Jats can buy land. Land suddenly became valuable. And then if a Jat cannot buy land, then a Brahmin or a Khatri can buy land. But nobody from the people they call lower caste could buy land. Okay? Now, it is human nature that if I'm given privileges, I will try and keep that privileges for me and my children. All right? And then on the women thing, the two Harding brothers who were negotiating with Maharani Jinda are on record saying, what sort of community is this? You've got a woman negotiating for them. And there was no recruitment of women into any positions. And suddenly women also became. And you know, the dowry system also started in 1880s, 1860s. Okay, because before then, dowry was only in the very, very aristocracy. It was not in normal people. And what they did was, suddenly a man had a value. With a gazetted officer, you had a value. Okay, and then because you were going to get pension, you were going to get money all your life. And then if you have, because we had arranged marriages, 6 families trying to get their daughter married to him, and then the one who gave him most money would marry. That's where the dowry system came. So, you know,
I think, yeah. I mean, I think history ebbs and flows, and I think I would agree that, caste is still powerful in Punjab and among Sikh communities,
yeah.
but that doesn't mean that somehow Sikhs, our teaching itself, condemns that. And certainly, if we take, say, the Khalsa, the creation of the Khalsa, possibly the most profound challenge to the caste system in the history of India. I mean, it was an overt attack on the caste system, but then again, you look at some of the traditions amongst some of the Nihangs, and they themselves have been practicing different bhate for different castes. So it kind of, that disease seems to kind of, it's like a virus. You might get rid of it and it comes back. Let's just go on.
Let me have a word in there. When Parliament was trying to introduce the word, okay, my challenge to them was, I'm not saying there is no discrimination. I asked them to define the word caste. Okay, in law, these things matter a lot. Okay, words matter a lot. How you define it matters a lot. And they could not. They gave these scholars £60,000 to find the definition of caste. Do you know what they came up with? Caste means different things to different people. And I said to the government, isn't this ridiculous? I go to court and say, this is what I believe. There's the man who says he's being discriminated, says, no, this is what he believes. The judge says he believes something else. How can you criminalize somebody on the basis you haven't even got a definition? Because the definition they used in Parliament was related to the Hindu Varna system. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, in the Sikhs, we have discrimination, fair enough. In groups, we have discrimination, but no Khatri, no Ravidasi, no Jat. Nobody goes to bed at night saying the Ardas, May Vaheguru, may I be born into the next caste next time. Do we? We don't say things like that. So we are not based on the Varna system. We are not based on purity. Okay, we go to Gurdwaras. Do you know who's sitting next to you? Do you know who's taking the langar? Okay, so you don't know who's making the langar.
You found yourself with strange bedfellows when you were opposing bringing in the anti-caste legislation. You had the Hindu Council support, and we had that debate many years ago. But what's the current situation on that? What's the current situation? Is the Labour government still pursuing this, or is it now a dead horse?
You know what I'm saying? The Labour government has gone quiet, but the Sikhs being Sikhs, there's a Sikh MP who's trying to revive it. I mean, you talk about own goals. The community is just full of idiots. Why are you creating a law which, why do you want to... The one thing I said to the MPs was, the biggest problem in this country is class, not caste. Okay? So why you're not introducing a legislation to protect people of low class from discrimination? Okay? Oh, this has nothing to do with us. I am a low caste. I was born in a miner's family. My grandfather's a miner. I said, it doesn't matter. Your grandfather was a miner. This was the lady, she was a baroness or whatever, leading the whole legislation. I said, it doesn't matter what your grandfather was. I worked in Gillingham, and I know people from working class, white people, who cannot advance in their careers because their accent is different, because their habits are different. Whereas I am a better protected species in this country. I can go to the hospital and say I'm being discriminated. Okay, I can go to the law, say I'm being discriminated. They can't. You're not protecting your own. You seem to be obsessed with small things. The reason I said I accuse them of colonialism, what you do to the world. You always take somebody else's problem and say we are going to sort it for you, and they couldn't come up with anything.
We're gonna be finishing in about 5-10 minutes, but I just want you to bring us up to the kind of, in some senses, it's not directly about the work that you do in the UN, but it is about diversity. And if we think about the kind of right shift towards right, we've touched on it earlier on. We've got Farage in this country, got Trump in the US, and across Europe. I mean, if anything, the noises, the kind of states are saying you have to integrate, you have to almost assimilate. And I know that in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, there was assimilation policies, and then we had multiculturalism and anti-racism, and I've done a lot of writing on that. But it does seem to me that we've gone full circle now, and there is this sense you have to assimilate. What's wrong with assimilating?
Well, take a turban off then, Gurnam Singh. Why are you wearing a turban? Assimilation means becoming like a white person. Okay, take your beard off.
Well, let me respond to that. The vast majority of Sikhs have taken their turbans off.
Yeah,
and
fair
they're
enough.
living successful lives.
That's because they felt
They're living
inferior.
successful lives.
Yeah,
Right?
they felt that there's a superior culture. We need to integrate with that. We need to assimilate with that. Would we do that in Punjab, for instance, force everybody to wear a turban?
Well, in Punjab, they are voluntarily removing their turbans in the villages there.
No,
Anyway.
but that's there's a SGPC,
They're
isn't it?
assimilating into the Hindutva, into the Indian national identity.
Yeah, that's a different thing. Yeah.
So I suppose the point is that it's a serious point. If you look at China, I mean, China had their cultural evolution. China, I mean, one of the things about China is that they do suppress cultural diversity, and they're very successful economically. And you find that in other. So I suppose, where are your priorities? Are your priorities in economic success or in celebrating, culture and traditions? Where do you kind of, for most people, economics is more important. The Jathedars come from India, enough because they want to only the. So, how serious are people about diversity anyway? Is it just us and people like yourself that are kind of harking on about it?
No, look. The teachings of the Guru Granth Sahib, if somebody doesn't abide by them, doesn't mean that we should then bring ourselves to the low common denominator. Okay, the teachings of the Guru Granth Sahib are very high. Some people live by them. Some people abide by them. Some people misunderstand them. Some people interpret them differently. Okay, that's fine. But that doesn't mean we should not now put them in some sort of a lock and say until the whole Sikh community changes, we are not going to tell the world. Okay, I think those teachings have, maybe contradicting my word, have universal value in universal benefits, or they have some universal value in a way. Okay, but the world never stays static. It might become quite diverse in UK at this stage. In 10 years, it might change, and then 30 years, it might change back into diversity. So things keep on changing, but anyway, we stick with the principles that we have. We project what we have, and we tell the world this is one way of dealing with a lot of tensions that exist in the world. A lot of tensions exist in states because they're trying to create an identity. What is the biggest tension, let's say, in India? We've seen this in your lifetime. Yeah? In India, the biggest tension is the country is trying to find an identity, a national identity. And what they're doing is they first tried to be secular, which didn't work. Now they're trying to create a Hindu identity. So how do you create a Hindu identity? You marginalize other communities. Okay. So now, if they go back to what the Vedic system was, what the Sikh system was, that instead of creating a national identity, which is a European concept, why don't you go back on the plurality of civilization and start accepting? But there's no Indian genius yet who's been able to work the system. This was one of the arguments I had with them. I have not seen a single Indian genius. They said Mahatma Gandhi. I said, he told you to do the charkha instead of industry. Why didn't you follow him? Why are you telling us to follow him then? But, the point is,
okay. Yeah.
We should not stop taking the ideas from the Guru Granth Sahib across to the world.
No, but absolutely. And we are now kind of running out of time. So I don't know if there's any, we will be picking up other themes in future programs, and, these conversations will go on forever. Yeah. But any plans in the UN, anything happening at the moment around this work or connected to that?
Yeah. There's always work going on. We had 4 events this month. We went to the World Summit on Sustainable Development, where we brought the whole idea of langar as a way of dealing with many of the social ills such as poverty, hunger, etc. And we showed how langar deals with about 7 items of the Sustainable Development Goals, 7 goals of the Sustainable Development. Harmeet was the General Secretary of Singh Sabha, spoke on that. And then the next day we spoke on digitalization, how to bring bringing digital education to the older people so that the age gap is not becoming wider and wider. At one time used to be about fashion and attitudes, but now it's about older people not being able to see what their kids are doing on the whole computer thing. Then we have this COP. We are going to COP. We're taking Baba Seva Singh's group there as well. And then there's a forum on business and human rights. And then there's a forum on minorities. The forum on minorities, we are going to raise the Declaration of Diversity again. So it continues. There's a lot of work going on at the UN. Us little group.
No, that's really good. And hopefully we will pick up some of these things. And you mentioned the langar. I actually think that, we should do a lot more work on the langar. I think academics haven't done enough research on the langar.
Yeah.
I think potentially the concept of langar could be the one single most powerful contribution that the Sikh can give to the whole world. I mean, can you imagine if the whole world embraces the concept of langar?
No, it is exactly what we said. Everybody, the problem with the modern world is everybody is dependent on the state. They're asking the state to provide. State should do this, state should do this, state should give minimum wage, that sort of thing. The Sikhs have shown we have existed without the help of the state. We are a community who survive on our own, okay? And langar is one of the incredible things that the Gurus gave us. And the message we gave at the World Summit on Sustainable Development was other communities can also, we're not saying do the same thing as us, sit on the floor and read, you can have your own concept where the community takes care of itself, which they used to do at one time. Most communities in the villages took care of themselves. They didn't let a person starve because it was disabled and could not go and...
I think the most powerful for me aspect of langar is that when you participate in langar, there's no stigma involved. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And whereas I think what you find with aid agencies or even with charities in the West, in this country, is often, it's framed within charity. Langar is not charity. That's the key point, isn't it?
It's very important. This is why I say there's the concept of aid does not exist in the Sikhs. It's seva, 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 seva. You're giving to the Guru is giving to everybody. And if Gurnam Singh, professor's salary, nice car, nice house, goes to Gurdwara and says, I'm not going to sit with local people, then people will think you're not a good Sikh. Okay? Gurnam Singh or Maharaja or the president of the country or the poorest man will sit on the floor. It completely, inequality is removed there. Yeah? Discrimination is removed there. We are all one there and we eat with each other.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up now, but so thanks, Dr. Jasdev Singh Rai from the Sikh Human Rights Group. Thank you for sharing your insights and the inspiring vision for a more inclusive world. The proposed UN Declaration on Diversity reminds us that difference is not a threat, but the very essence of life and human progress. And whether we're looking at biodiversity or human diversity, actually without diversity, nothing can exist. And so thank you for watching the Sikh Think Tank today. This series on global challenges and the Sikh perspective. Join us again in the not too distant future for another show. So until then, ਅਸੀਂ ਫਤਿਹ ਬੁਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ. Thank you again just there for joining us. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ.